Welcome to Water Talk with Paul the Waterman, brought to you by Water Pros. Paul the Waterman is Colorado's expert on all things related to the water we use and drink in our homes. Have you ever thought about where your water actually comes from? Is it safe to drink? Is it harmful to my health, my skin, or my hair? Paul the Waterman knows water, and he has the answers. So get ready to talk to the Waterman yourself right now. Call in with your questions to talk with your host, Paul the Waterman.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. I'm sure happy to have you with me today here at the powerhouse of AM 560 KLZ Studios, FM 100.7. You can give us a call at 303-477-5600. Any questions or comments, feel free. I want to start the show by covering a couple things that I saw out in the field this week, and one of them ran into some more turbidity, and so I wanted to cover what turbidity is. This was up in Nunn, Colorado. It's up north outside of Greeley, Fort Collins area. And what floaty dirt or turbidity is in some cases, and this is where it can be serious, and serious because you turn on the water, it looks nice and clear. Even like looking at a glass of water, it looks nice and clear. But as you set it on the counter and it settles, then the dirt precipitates out of the water. And so when you have turbidity and you have floaty dirt, what that means is that the dirt, once it settles, can carry carcinogens, can carry bacteria, can carry viruses. And that's what makes it, a serious issue is in some cases, turbidity can be high enough where you can see the cloudiness in the glass of water. But when you're at that state where, it doesn't look that cloudy, you can, think, hey, this looks normal to me. And when you set that glass on the counter and, half hour goes by and you start seeing gray silt at the bottom of that glass, that's your turbidity. Now, the only way to remove turbidity is with an ultrafilter. Any kind of inline filter, that turbidity is going to plug up, and it's going to plug up quick. And remember, well pumps do not like to pump against resistance. So when you have turbidity in the water and you do an inline filter, eventually that inline filter is going to get clogged. And what was happening at this house is the inline filter they didn't have, but the filter for the wash machine was getting plugged. And that's because of the turbidity, or the dishwasher, or the, taking a shower and it seems like you're losing water pressure. Well, you're not losing water pressure. The turbidity or floaty dirt's overtaking and plugging up the aerators. So, ultrafiltration. And so what an ultrafiltration is, it's a system that uses reverse osmosis membranes, commercial reverse osmosis membranes, but they're pleated. And they're pleated so they can filter out the turbidity, but you don't need, any recovery. It means it's a filter on demand. Typical commercial RO waters take 1 gallon of water as wastewater to make 1 gallon of product water. But with an ultrafilter, this technology allows the filtration on a 1-to-1 ratio. So that's something I wanted to cover. Also, I want to say hi to some very special people. They've been a customer of Water Pros for a long time, and that's Dave and Heidi Thomas. They're outside of Castle Rock, and I'm just grateful to know these people. They're great people, fun people to visit. They're on well water, have high iron content, and we put in a dual tank water softener. And then we had to deal with the acidity, and so we have a neutralizer, and then we had to polish up the neutralizer because neutralizer basically, bleeds hard water. And one of the things when I was able to visit them today and say hi and check out the system, and one of the things that for those folks out there with dual tank water softeners, it's a good idea on a maintenance schedule to check out the injectors. Iron content can change, iron content can increase, and so an injector on a water softener helps with the flow rate between the water and the soap, which is the brine water, or the salt water. And when that gets plugged, then you don't get a proper cleaning, and then iron like I've always said, iron, once it oxidizes, then it's game over because oxidized iron passes through any kind of filtration system. Water softening resin loves iron, but loves iron as ferrous iron only. And ferrous iron, resin will grab. So that's water that before it oxidizes, it's called ferrous iron. And at that state, water softening resin will remove that as well as remove hard water. So that's just an important safety tip that with, regular maintenance on dual tank systems, especially if they've been installed for a while. So anyway, I want to say hi to my friends out in Castle Rock, and I love seeing you this morning. And thank you for being a customer. Sure appreciate it. So last week, we talked regarding the EPA, and we kind of during the show discovered non-regulated contaminants, and the EPA has non-regulated contaminants, and what that means is that municipalities are not responsible for testing for non-regulated contaminants, and then those contaminants are not listed in the water quality report because they're unregulated. So we're going to address that today. Something that I learned that I want to share with you is pharmaceuticals. We talk a lot about pharmaceuticals. And at the EPA, if you go to the EPA website under household medication disposal, epa.gov/household medication -disposal, it talks about how pharmaceuticals enter the environment. And it's something that, medicines placed in a trash can can enter the environment via the landfill, flushing leftover medicine contaminants, down the toilet. We talked about that. So pharmaceuticals, can enter the environment different ways, and some unintentional, some intentional. Other sources of pharmaceuticals in the environment is human excretion. That's basically going to the bathroom. There's really no nice way to describe that. Medicines that we take are not entirely absorbed by our bodies. A portion is excreted into wastewater. Some of the other sources of pharmaceuticals in the environment include landfills. So when you go into a landfill, basically rainwater is going to go through the dirt and get through all the trash, and eventually it's going to get into our water supply. And so that's something that when you have a landfill, you're engineering, you're designing a landfill, there's really no barrier from all the trash that they bury. There's no barrier that protects the water that gets through the landfill and eventually gets into our water supply or an aquifer. Again, flushing leftover medication and wastewater treatment plants. So this is something, wastewater treatment plants, that I want to cover because in some cases I've read information online and from other resources where it gave you an indication that wastewater treatment plants have the ability to remove pharmaceuticals. And so I want to state here that the EPA, in this story that I'm reading to you, that I got off the EPA website, clearly states, and I'm going to jump ahead a couple pages and read this, is that while some waste treatment plants have implemented advanced treatment technologies, even these technologies are not specifically designed to remove pharmaceuticals. So they just aren't set up for it. And I think it's, we need to be truthful with that. Why do we need to be truthful? Because people need to understand that pharmaceuticals are a hazard. They're in our drinking water, and we're not paying attention to it because they're not making it aware. They're not making us aware of, what we have as far as pharmaceutical contamination. The other thing is when you go to reusable water, and reusable water is something that really concerns me, then have they done any thought to what the pharmaceutical concentration will be in a reusable water state? So these are questions that, we have to ask, and, are they thought out? And pharmaceuticals are emerging contaminant concern, in my personal opinion, that has to be addressed. So last week, as we were, covering this topic, and I was reading the information that we had, sharing with you, the reports that we found, when it hit me that, the EPA has a huge list of unregulated contaminants, and the unregulated contaminants is something that they monitor, but it's not reported. That to me was a huge red flag. That should be a huge red flag for everybody. One of them is, 1,4-dioxin, which we found was, something that has been really dumped in our water supply since its invention, where, in the I think it was 1893 when 1,4-dioxin first, was invented in out of manufacturing practices. So when you look at what really is dumped into our water supply, if you think about it, think about a glass of water. And if we look at it that way, out of a glass of water, think what we could have motor oil is one contaminant, right? Contains heavy metals. But motor oil is something that even on the highways today, is, get motor oil leaking from leaky cars. And then when you get, heavy rain, like we had the last couple of days, what happens with that? That motor oil gets right into the sewer system. The sewer system actually helps feed our water, our water resource. We have yard waste, pesticides that we use to kill, plants and bugs that we don't want. Fertilizers can also, be a part of it. And then we have pet waste, harmful bacteria that it gets into our water supply. Cat litter, is something that can get into our water supply. What all that does is certain disinfection processes help neutralize, but others don't. And then keep in mind the disinfection byproducts that are used. One of them we talked about, trihalomethanes. So on top of pharmaceuticals, on top of the disinfectant byproducts that we have, then we also have the PFAS contamination, the forever chemicals contamination. Then last week, at the end of last week's show, what hit me really, like a ton of bricks being dropped on your toe, was thinking about the nanoplastic problem that we have and where nanoplastics are penetrating the body. And so nanoplastics are another major concern because of the carcinogens they can carry and where pharmaceuticals can latch on to the nanoplastics. So we have a bunch of issues here. Sit back and get ready to have some great information being presented to you, and we'll be right back after this timeout.
The EPA is making changes in regulations for water safety because of elevated levels of lead, Gen X, and forever chemicals in water supplies. Locally owned and operated Water Pros has home treatment solutions ready to install today. Water Pros employs the latest technologies and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water, lead in your water, and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary test and consultation now, waterpros.net.
Hello, Paul the Waterman here for Water Pros. In the last 6 months, you've received letters from your local water company regarding the dangerous forever chemicals in your water. Several local news television outlets have done segments on the dangers in our drinking water. Trust me when I say pharmaceuticals are the next issue. Water Pros employs the latest technology and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary water test now at waterpros.net. That's waterpros.net.
Forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine are real contaminants in our water. Clean water is essential for our everyday life. Water is the best flushing agent our bodies can use. We cook with water, we bathe in water, and we grow our food with water. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation. Water Pros can educate you about the concerns of forever chemicals, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and total chlorine, and discuss ways to remove these contaminants from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net to request your free in-home consultation. Water Pros is a family-owned, veteran-owned business dedicated to offering the best solutions to meet the needs of the water concerns we have today. Call 303-862-5554 today or at www.waterpros.net.
AM 560 KLZ, your home station.
Okay, welcome back to Water Talk. Let's get ready and give you a bunch of information that's very, very important and we all need to know. I want to bring in a guest, our resident expert. He is a wastewater water treatment operator, Mark Woodlack. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
So I asked Mark to join us because I want him to give us the 411 on unregulated contaminants that go through the waste treatment plant. So help us out, Mark. Help us understand everything about what those unregulated contaminants and what you guys do.
Well, just a little bit of history on where it comes from. So the EPA has a kind of a list of contaminants and the severity of the contaminants, and there's four basic stages on putting contaminants on the watch list that water plant operators have to monitor for and treat for. The very, very first step is what is the EPA calls it the investigation state. So if there is a concern by the public or by American Water Works Association or another agency and says, hey, even by the EPA says, hey, we should take a look at this chemical that we found, contaminant, inorganic that we found in the water, there needs to be more research done on it. And so there's quite a checklist that has to be done to put that on there. So just so you know, it's a nomination process. Like if you want to nominate somebody to vote, the public can submit that to the EPA and nominate a specific chemical that they have a concern, or like I said, inorganic. And once that goes through the regulatory process or investigation, and it can take almost up to 5 years, that gets put on a unregulated contaminant list. So the EPA notice is out there. It's not really much on the radar as far as the water plant, because the water plant's following the rules and regulations specifically that they have to follow and meeting the current criteria that's out there.
So basically, if I am concerned of a contaminant, we call the EPA or contact the EPA via email and say how much puberty blockers are in the water, for example. And so then they would nominate that. That would be approved to say, okay, let's monitor this. And then at that point, it could take up to 5 years before it got in consideration of being monitoring. Is that what you said? Yeah.
So after that, that's kind of the investigation stage. So after that is the determination, and then from the determination, there's more research done on the side effects
of what happened,
of what could happen.
How would you guys, when you monitor these, how would you go about? Do you report them? You keep a log, and then you turn that information into the EPA, or is that just self-information?
As far as I know, it's just research that maybe the EPA might reach out to us and say, hey,
what did you get?
What did you get on it and everything? And so we don't regularly report on that at all, or we aren't even required to report on it.
See, this is important, everybody out there in Radio Land. When you get an unregulated contaminant, it's not reported. And so let me ask you a question. I was curious. What lab do you guys use when you do your testing? Where do you send it?
We use Colorado Analytical.
Okay. And then you basically, do they have the ability right now to test for PFAS? Do you know?
I contacted them and they just put that together because there's been a lot of information coming out there and a lot of concern. So, and there are municipalities in Colorado who are required to test for that now.
Okay, so Colorado Analytical is a source that you guys use. You can't use the state lab because their credentials have been removed.
It's sad to hear that.
Yeah, the state of Colorado, the lab credentials were suspended by the EPA. So Colorado Analytical, I'm glad there's a place that is there and can be tested. As of right now, in a water quality report, would you see PFAS in that water quality report, do you think? Because that's not an unregulated contaminant anymore, right?
It is, as far as the plants that I manage, it is not on the smaller size plants. But if I sent you some websites that you can go to and you can research the monitoring requirements, the state, and there are requirements that are said you have to test for that. And then if anything, the results have to be public information on that.
So if the PFAS, PFOs, PFAs exceed the EPA limit, then that's something that has to be reported.
Which hasn't really been finalized.
It's still working through that.
Right.
Okay. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, some of you in Denver County, Adams County received those letters in 2024, stating that we had PFAS levels that were above the standards. However, now this is just my personal opinion. The EPA announced through various news, paper articles online, that you pointed out to me, and I found another one, that they're going to set back some of the deadlines for these PFAS removal. I think they're going to give municipalities 2 more years. And I think that's because, the technology isn't there yet. Then there's some of the forever chemicals. They're thinking about, reducing the restriction, and I hope they rethink that, because some of those other contaminants were made to replace the PFAS and the PFOs or PFAs of forever chemicals. So, Gen X is one of them that I hope they don't, because Gen X chemicals are just as bad as PFAS. Right now, the EPA mandated, I think this year, 2025, that people are supposed to, this is in the United States only, are supposed to stop using PFAS in chemical, in production, also making in cookware, right?
Right.
And so, but other nations, we don't know if that's the same case. In PFAS, this is a global problem that's been going on. I'm just saying this to remind folks, it's a global problem that's been going on, the contamination issue since the 1970s. And only in the 1990s that it was really, brought to our attention. So there's over 20 years of this issue, but then it really didn't start being regulated until 2024, when the EPA had all these webinars and we're even talking about it. So what's your thoughts on, and it's hard to, I think, get people to understand, but, what's your thoughts when they say, you can have a contaminant down to like 1 part per billion?
It sounds like a very, very small amount, but it depends on the strength of whatever they're trying to regulate.
Right.
1 part per billion could be enough to kill you in some cases.
Correct. And 1 part per billion, they said, you take Olympic-sized swimming pool, and 1 part per billion would be that, enough the contamination. And now it's been advanced down to 4 part per trillion, and then in some of these, they want 0. They want nothing in there. And I make this point is because I've always told folks that you don't need to have a large number to have a contamination issue, even with water hardness, even with iron content, as you know. What else on with your unregulated contaminants that is there anything out there that you feel is an emerging issue that we should pay attention to?
I think what caught my interest with you on your show was just kind of the mention of the pharmaceuticals that are we're becoming more aware of it. I think our pharmaceuticals have been in the water and wastewater for years, for decades, and that was the big that was kind of the big news that came up. I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You shared that article with the public as far as that family up in, I think it was in Maine,
right?
That just they bought a piece of property, they moved out there. Their whole hope was to just go let's go organic. And then the EPA said, hey, we should go ahead and test your property. And it's like, why us and everything? Well, the EPA knew right away that they were applying biosolids,
right,
which wasn't regulated for PFAS. And then they went back and I'm sorry, we're going to have to shut down your operations.
That's a whole nother, I think, a quiet ticking time bomb, in my opinion. How many farms out there, farmlands, livestock, have this forever chemical contamination because of the biosolids? But then we have a bigger issue is what do we do with the biosolids? I had a family member, I was doing some research. I got a great family. They do a lot of work and help me on this show, so thank you. I really appreciate that. I just want to give them a shout out. But one of the things that they were talking about was water distillers, right? And so it's the process of when you're boiling something and the steam. And so a water distiller basically boils the water, then takes that steam and then transfers that steam, and that steam should be pure water. But these forever chemicals don't boil off. I don't see how a pharmaceutical in the water, if you convert it to steam, basically can, disappear. That's my concern. I have to, make this statement. I think pharmaceutical contamination has been an issue since, modern day prescription drugs or, the first drugstore opened up.
Probably at the turn of the century,
Right.
early 1900s.
Exactly. Because if you can go and you can take a water sample and you can test for every major over-the-counter medication, from Tylenol to ibuprofen, right? Acetaminophen used to be, that's something that's concerning. What's that Benadryl is another one.
Indicator cursor.
Right. So when those things are in our water supply, then we know that from news reports that they go to waste treatment plants in neighborhoods and they test the water to see heroin or cocaine or fentanyl, and they can tell right in that neighborhood that where the highest activity is by testing the wastewater. So as this community, we see, it's growing leaps and bounds. I mean, there's neighborhoods that I've, been through. I've been here for over 30 years. I've never been driven through before, and I can't, when did this pop up? And then, some of them have been here for over 10 years. But the water supply and the water resources we have hasn't changed. So when we go into that reusable water state, that's what concerns me is, when we reuse water, are we increasing the concentration level? And then at what part per billion does a certain medication become harmful? And if you're reusing that water, then, clearly common sense tells me that eventually you're building up, let's call it the concentration of that certain contaminant. And, Mark, I don't think they're thinking about that logically. I think what they're thinking about is how do we get more water? And, I can't see, and this is another, I can't see them filtering out pharmaceuticals unless they all use, reverse osmosis technology, which is very expensive.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive, and as far as I'm aware, I think that's the only one that's out there. The final treatment for water, that's the only one that's out there. And like on a municipality side, I think it's for every gallon that's produced, there's a gallon of waste on it.
Right.
The electrical energy is very expensive.
Right.
And then just the timeline of your filters, they have to get changed out. It's kind of interesting. Like one of the things you said earlier, as far as testing for sewer lines, you're trying to do an investigation where the drug use is. I think that was kind of a lot of the initial discovery of like, oh my goodness, we're trying to track down some kind of drug house, and we're going to track them down going down the sewer lines.
Yeah.
Now we're finding all these other drugs that are in the water. Now we're finding all these other pharmaceuticals. So a lot of this has just been coming along with the discovery. It's evolving. And like the EPA is trying to kind of, it's a balance between discovery, putting things on the unregulated contaminant list, and then doing something about it. Because especially on these pharmaceuticals and these other drugs and everything that are coming into the water and everything, they can go ahead. Is a balance between them doing an implementation of like making this a requirement that water treatment plants treat for, and the cost that's involved versus the side effects that could result from not doing anything at all.
There you go. Hey, let's take a little quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Colorado's residents are known for healthy lifestyles, outdoor living, and clean organic eating. 100% Colorado-owned and operated Water Pros provide affordable in-home water treatment options. Water Pros can help you with hard water, lead, and forever chemicals in your drinking water. Living organic means eating organic, and eating organic starts with clean water. Learn more about your water and schedule your free consultation today. waterpros.net. Water Pros. Healthy water means a healthier you.
What's in your water? Are you concerned about drinking hormones, antibiotics, or dangerous chemicals? Paul the Waterman here from Water Pros. Don't wait to be sure your water is free from those contaminants. Have our professionals help with affordable solutions. Visit waterpros.net today.
If you have hard water, smelly water, or water that just tastes bad, improve the quality of your water with the professionals at Water Pros. Water is a precious resource that's a part of everyday life. Harmful cleaners, forever chemicals, microplastics, and pharmaceuticals end up in our water supply, and they don't just magically disappear. Water treatment should not cost tens of thousands of dollars or require long-term financing. For KLZ listeners, a complete Water Pros water treatment system start at only $31.95 installed. See why people are trusting the professionals with Water Pros. Water Pros is a family-owned and veteran-owned business dedicated to providing you the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test, or call 303-862-5554. That's 303-862-5554. And ask for the KLZ Listener Special. $31.95 for a whole house water softener and point of use reverse osmosis.
This is AM 560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. This is Paul the Waterman. So we have a couple clips I want to share with you. Luke, can we play the first one, please?
Tonight, there's an alarming new report about the water you're drinking from plastic bottles. CBS's national environmental correspondent David Schechter has the details.
It's a sobering study and could have profound health implications on the way we consume water. Scientists at Columbia and Rutgers now say an average liter of bottled water contains nearly 250,000 particles of nanoplastics, each the fraction of the width of a human hair. There's been a wealth of research on larger microplastics, much of which end up in oceans, breaking down into tiny fragments. A potential environmental nightmare, but the World Health Organization has called the medical risk low. But with nanoplastics...
Do you think there is a reason for concern?
Yes, when they are getting into the nano size, can get into the blood, and then they can being transported to the vital organs.
The particles there can actually bypass the cells of the GI system.
The International Bottled Water Association says there's no scientific consensus on potential health impacts, and media reports do nothing more than unnecessarily scare consumers.
Have you changed your own personal use of water bottles after learning this?
I intentionally cut down my bottled water consumption maybe by half.
These scientists recommend consumers use tap water to fill up aluminum bottles as a safer alternative. David Schechter, CBS News, Los Angeles.
So I wanted to kind of reiterate the concern or contamination of the plastics in bottled water. And I wanted to also call out the bottled water industry for saying, oh, there's no, don't worry about it, everything's fine, approach and attitude, because that is absolutely wrong. And so let's play, Luke, the clip from Fox News.
For your weekend wellness, and we start with a new study on the impact of microplastics, which found human brains contained as much plastic as a plastic spoon, which is up 50% from 2016. Fox News medical contributor Dr. Nicole Saphier joins us now. Doctor, thanks for being with us. Okay, so I read this, and that sounds awfully scary to me. And I was talking with my wife last night, like, do we need to get rid of all the plastic stuff in our kitchen? What do you make of this?
Well, good morning, Brian, and happy Mother's Day to your
Likewise.
wife and my mother as well. You know, microplastics, I've got to be honest with you, Brian, they make me a little concerned. And a lot of this is because we're looking at cadaver or postmortem autopsy studies. And what we're finding is in the brains of people who have dementia, there's actually higher amounts of microplastics. So essentially, these microplastics, or these tiny little particles of plastics, are crossing the blood-brain barrier, and they're depositing into our brain. And they're being correlated with increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, possibly linked to autism and other things that affect the brain. There's also evidence showing increased risk of stroke and increased inflammation overall. So I have always said, listen, there's no way to avoid microplastics entirely unless you're going to live in a bubble. And by the way, that bubble couldn't be a plastic bubble. It'd have to be a glass bubble. But there are some things that we can do to decrease our exposure to microplastics. And one of the big things is you want to cut out those tea bags. I'm a big herbal tea drinker. I love tea. You want to be using loose leaf tea because tea bags actually have a lot of microplastics in it. In addition to that, get away from those plastic cutting boards that you may have in your kitchen, because if you're cutting your fruits, your vegetables, your meats on that, you're getting pieces of plastic in your food. Well, plastic water bottles, that's a big one. Unfortunately, if you can do away from plastic water bottles, get glass. Same with stuff that you store your food in. Don't microwave plastic, and try to filter your water because there are microplastics everywhere. And so when we're talking about brain health, after the age of 55, about 42% of people have a risk of dementia. Good news is we're seeing a decline in dementia rates. However, dementia is incredibly prevalent in our society. So it's important that you do everything you can to preserve your brain health before you hit start seeing signs of dementia. And even if you have early signs of dementia, you want to do what you can to preserve that brain function. One of the best things you can do, keep exercising, because getting that blood flow to the brain, very important. Maintain socialization, talking to other people. That stimulates your brain, doing puzzles. Prioritize sleep. Sleep is so important, Brian. You've heard me say it so many times.
Yes.
And also, you are what you eat. Make sure you're eating foods high in choline, like salmon, eggs, lean chickens, lean proteins, and also, you know, I love my natural herbs, whether it's bacopa monieri, ginkgo biloba, ginseng, rosemary, sage. Incorporate all of this into your diet, or try and take some supplements to help with your brain health.
Okay, those are great tips, and I have got some changes to make in my life, doctor. No question about that. But I got to ask you about this as well. So Vanity Fair is out with a new piece basically saying that the American obsession with protein is a mega problem. What do you think about that?
I don't know why everything has to be political, okay? Let's just talk about diet. First of all, I have always been against fad diets. I hate extremes of everything. I am one of those everything in moderation kind of people. But when you're talking about, you know, the keto diet, the paleo diet, these really high protein diets, they're great when it comes to losing weight, because if you're cutting out those sugars and your carbs, absolutely, you're going to be burning that fat. And that's what people want to do instead of taking a GLP-1 injection. They're actually trying to change their lifestyle, which I'm all for. However, these high protein diets, in my opinion, is long term, they can have some negative consequences. So you want to have a variety when it comes to what you're eating. You absolutely want those lean proteins. They're essential for your muscle mass, especially in women as you get older, perimenopausal, menopause. You need protein to keep your muscle and your bone strength. But you also, if you only eat meat and you're cutting out the fruits and vegetables, you're not getting the fiber, you're not getting the antioxidants, the folate, and everything else that is so crucial to our health. So everything in moderation, Brian. Okay. Let's have a variety in the things we eat and avoid all that ultra-processed crap.
Doctor, your tips are the best. Thank you for those, and a very happy Mother's Day to you indeed.
So I wanted to share this with you. Of course, you could tell it was last week, the story. It was Mother's Day. But if you remember, we played a Fox News clip not too long ago that talked about plastics being found in the brain size of a credit card. Now the plastics are being found in the brain in a short period of time. You know, it's a spoon or fork, she said, and so that's a utensil. And they find this by, you know, cadavers, autopsies. So, you know, this is something that, with all the contamination that's in the water today, and the unregulated contaminants that we have, these plastics can basically, these contaminations can piggyback on these plastics and penetrate the body as well.
Right.
So talk about biosolids, and there's no way right now, right, to remove nanoplastics, pharmaceuticals, PFAS, and we have the biosolids that we have to get rid of.
Yeah, I think the only thing to get it out of the biosolids is incineration, which is very expensive.
And this is something that I don't think communities, do you think communities, they don't think about this? And we talked about this, when you first came on the show. We need to get more people involved in the water treatment, wastewater treatment industry than ever before. We need solutions. But I don't think municipalities are even taking this issue seriously right now. Only if the EPA mandates fines, would they take this issue seriously. And that's another, topic. Why even, have to find somebody because you need to do that to get them to, follow along with the program?
Well, it's like a municipality. It's politically driven, and the water and wastewater side are two important things. A lot of municipalities are just trying to keep it shoestring their small system or the large system and try to keep it going when it should have been replaced probably 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
So we have an infrastructure issue.
And then, and then what happens is like the municipality will approach the city and say, hey, we have to make these changes. And then unless there's like a crisis, which so many politicians work on crises, emergencies, whatever it is, it's difficult to convince the public like we're gonna have to increase your water bills. We're have to increase your wastewater bills to pay for this infrastructure, because these days, if you do an upgrade for $10 million, that's cheap. And so a lot of municipalities are looking at looking at hundreds of millions of dollars just to maintain the conditions of the water that they currently have. And then the EPA, the EPA is like, well, we can't add any more rules and regulations than what we do right now, because it's even going to break more systems down that are barely making it through.
See, this is another. You're spot on, but here's another issue. As I'm thinking about it, we talked about reverse osmosis filtration. The expense of a reverse osmosis system for a municipal water supply, I would think in today's marketplace, could easily be $500 million to $1 billion.
Easily.
And the other concern then, the problem, is that the dirty water that the reverse osmosis removes, that has to go somewhere. And if they're injecting that back into the ground and gets into an aquifer, then all we have is concentrated contamination. And so there's really no solution for this that is a fast fix. I said this, last week. This is a generational issue.
It's both a generational issue and a self-responsibility issue too. I think there's two approaches. One is like when I got on the show a while back, is like get involved.
Right.
Learn the trade. Get your license. Find out what needs to be done there. The other one is work with the EPA. It's just like put together a list of contaminants that you're concerned about that, and get those nominated for the EPA to look into. But you know how quick the government goes. So to get a change in regulation, if things go smoothly, if you want to add, let's say we wanted to add some new pharmaceutical drug that we found on, it's going to take 10 years.
10 years.
10 years. So by that time, there's just going to be a reaction. The new regulation comes up. The municipality are like, oh my God, this is going to take 20 years for us to meet these regulations. Or they'll just say, hey, it's cheaper for us to just pay the fines. And that's why it's better, like you're encouraging it, individual responsibility. Start at your home and work out.
Let's take our last time out. We'll be right back.
Forever Chemicals in our water is now a part of our life. Forever Chemicals means that these chemicals don't break down. Call Water Pros for your free in-home evaluation of the concerns of Forever Chemicals and the ways to remove Forever Chemicals from your family's water supply. Call 303-862-5554 and request your free evaluation, or go to waterpros.net.
Hello, Paul the Waterman here for Water Pros. In the last 6 months, you've received letters from your local water company regarding the dangerous forever chemicals in your water. Several local news television outlets have done segments on the dangers in our drinking water. Trust me when I say pharmaceuticals are the next issue. Water Pros employs the latest technology and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary water test now at waterpros.net. That's waterpros.net.
The EPA is making changes in regulations for water safety because of elevated levels of lead, Gen X, and forever chemicals in water supplies. Locally owned and operated Water Pros has home treatment solutions ready to install today. Water Pros employs the latest technologies and an expertly trained staff to help you with hard water, lead in your water, and mitigating forever chemicals. Book your complimentary test and consultation now, waterpros.net.
You're listening to AM 560 KLZ, your home station.
Welcome back to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. Mark's with me today. So during the break, Mark shared with me some, I think, is disturbing information to give you an idea. If you found a new contaminant that you wanted investigated, the process basically is 13 years from, the contamination candidate list. That takes about 5 years, and then you get to the initial regulatory determination, then another 24 months for a proposed minimum or maximum, contamination level treatment technique, and then another 6 years for it to be reviewed again. And then the PFAS, give you an idea, the PFAS, PFA, PFOs were put on the list in 2009. And then finally, in 2020, did the EPA start proposing permanently regulations regarding the PFAS, PFOs, and then it finally didn't get finalized until 2024 when they started having these EPA webinars regarding PFAS contamination. So folks, really what this boils down to is that you have to take the water quality, your drinking water quality, it's your responsibility. A point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system, Mark, I think should be as common in homes today as the hot water heater. When you have really hard water, hard water will affect the reverse osmosis drinking water system. So support a water softener. Water softener does two things. It cuts back on soaps and the soap products that we use, and some of the soap products that we use have chemical contamination in them. And so reverse osmosis membranes are designed to work in soft water. And that's the problem with the bottled water contamination, is that, they didn't use a water softener. So they had what I call sacrificial RO membranes that got eaten up by hard water, and then the hard water stays in the membranes, the plastics bounce off the hard water, become smaller, and then the bottled water.
And something to add about that, but the bottled water industry, they don't even come close to the rules and regulations that a municipality has to follow. And you really don't, they're not even regulated under the drinking rule regulations that municipalities have to follow. See, and then on top of that,
that's important.
You take that water that you don't even know for sure that it's being checked, and put it in a plastic bottle and leave it in the sun. It's not healthy at all.
I think we really need to do three things. One, stop using plastic. Let's go back into the day when we had glass bottles. You can get your milk delivered in glass bottles. The refreshment drinks, soda pop, was, glass bottles. So I think we need to go back to that. Food containers. There was wax paper, that was used to wrap products that we probably could, should go back to. Metal container. You know what? This tells you a lot. When a piece of metal will deteriorate, and plastic won't. And so that's something that, and a piece of metal, as it deteriorates, disappears. And we're not talking about contamination in our water supply based upon steel, based upon aluminum. We're not, based upon, because a car, deteriorates, faster, than a piece of plastic.
Well, there was lead, so.
Right, lead, yeah, lead. Okay, right. Good point. So, back to, we have to be responsible for our own water treatment. And, Mark said something just before the break. Reason why we have to get involved is we need more people, more young people to, get involved in the wastewater treatment industry, become engineers, and let's think about, water treatment isn't plug and play. And, I've always said that. And especially, there's nothing worse than when I go out and I see a carbon filter being, misused. Carbon filters are love organics. And I see a 5-micron carbon filter on well water thinking it's an iron filter. Well, the only thing it's doing is it's slowing the flow rate down because it's 5-micron. And as you slow the flow rate down, you're allowing the iron to oxidize out of the water. So it's not really filtering the water, it's slowing the flow rate down. And so as the iron oxidizes, it builds up on that carbon filter. And then they know it's time to change the carbon filter because they have no water pressure. But, carbon is not designed. It's for iron content. It's more for taste and odor. Then in this community, and it's basically from, I think the whole state of Colorado now uses the chloramine. And I know a single-phase carbon filter will not remove chloramine. You need a special filter design that's basically a 2-phase that can take out the chloramine and the ammonia, because you can separate the chloramine and separate the chlorine and still have the ammonia in the water supply. And then that's the case, then it's better to have it as a chloramine than the ammonia aspect of it. Then we have the byproducts just in the water supply from the sanitization of the water. There's cancer-causing chemicals used there. In long story short, the water treatment process has been allowed to probably fall behind the times. Don't you think?
Yeah, in only time, it's back to the crisis react or respond. There was two in I believe 1974 when the Clean Water Act was passed, was a big push, and there was a lot of wonderful regulations that was passed. And then it wasn't until, nothing got changed, and the EPA started just getting slower and slower and slower. A lot of regulations got changed. Remember up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, back in 1993, the cryptosporidium outbreak.
Right.
And the EPA was way behind the balls on getting things off of that unregulated list that we had talked about. And then the government says, like, EPA, you need to get your act together. You have to put some timelines. And that the timeline that we had talked about, where when you get a regulation, when you go from investigation, determination, rulemaking, and review, the EPA, there was no required timelines on when those stages had to be crossed. Now there is, but still, the EPA is missing those timelines.
What we need is there's an independent organization. It was here in Colorado, and I think I should play a part in bringing it back, and that's the Water Quality Association. We used to have a Colorado Water Quality Association, and that went away, but. California has the California, version of the Water Quality Association. The WQA stepped in and saved my industry because the NSF used to be known as National Sanitation Foundation. Now they just went by nsf.org. They're supposed to be non-for-profit. But years ago, they were the stamp of approval on filtration systems. And then what happened is, it appears they got greedy because they wanted a high dollar for they realized that their stamp was being used and they wanted to benefit from it. And so that would have caused delayed in manufacturing, delayed in certification, and increased pricing. The Water Quality Association stepped in and said, hey, we'll do this at a reduced level and we'll do it at the NSF standards. And so they kind of took over the certification. But now I think what we have to do is use them as a lobbying board to help. We need a big body to get local politicians, involved and pay attention to. For example, in 2015-ish, I know the Water Quality Association helped shape the modern day industry that we have here in Colorado, where if you want to do water treatment, you have to be a licensed plumber or certified, water quality, expert. And DORA basically, made water filtration become part of the plumbing board. Before that, they weren't. And then what happened is that legislation was passed, and they originally wanted, only master plumbers to do water treatment. But no disrespect to master plumbers, but a lot of master plumbers don't understand water treatment, nor I think some of them don't even care to understand water treatment. So, we're a plumbing contractor. We specialize in water treatment, water filtration. We got the last minute and a half, how would you like to wrap up your visit today?
Well, I'm picking up some themes from you. And one of the themes I'm picking up is if you have concerns about your water, talk to you, get the system that's going to work, but it becomes from an individual. And I think things are politically changing to where we've depended on big government. Now we realize that big government has let us down. And so it's going to start again, how it started this country, from a grassroots up, from the individual to the community.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for listening. I am so blessed to have you out there. And if you have any questions, you give us a call at 303-862-5554. Until next week, be blessed, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Remember to reach out to Paul the Waterman with your questions and water filtration needs, and be sure to tune in to Water Talk Thursdays at 2 p.m. to talk with Paul. And for more information, find him on the programming page at klzradio.com.